it's been known for a while that there's a rally, worldwide freedom rally planned for Saturday. We would be saying you cannot come in. Anyone who's planning to come in, it is an illegal gathering, and we'll be doing everything we can to prevent that gathering. And if people do get to make it into the CBD for that gathering, we will be enforcing that. Anyone who makes it in there will be subject to a $5,500 fine. Those who are trying to get in there along the way, if we encounter them and prevent them getting in there, they'll be getting that $1,800 fine as well for being outside their premises by 5 kilometres.
This year and last year, we have seen unprecedented levels of authoritarian power grabs in countries all over the world, always carried out in the name of protecting people, which is what tyrants always say when they want to control people. But that authoritarian insanity has also resulted in an unprecedented number of people who are finally starting to question things. Were you under the impression that the politicians really care about you, but just weren't quite sure of what you wanted? Are these politicians well-intentioned and noble, but possibly hard of hearing or something? So a bunch of people loudly asking for freedom might make them see the error of their ways. Deep down inside, you already know that the politicians know what you want. They just don't care at all. If the people stop viewing criminals as some rightful authority and stop obeying their decrees, the politicians' power evaporates.
Alrighty. Welcome to Toxic Airwaves. So the intro that I just played, it was from Australia. I think pretty much everybody that has been on the internet recently has seen that clip. It might get us banned from YouTube because they don't like us playing those, which is fine. Been planning on getting banned. And then the audio of the person talking, that's, one of our favorites, Larkin Rose. And he's been doing that on his YouTube channel. So make sure to go subscribe to him at Larkin Rose. He's got some epic content on there. But yeah, how you doing tonight, Skeef?
Doing pretty good. Yeah, I love that. I could watch that body slam 1,000 times in a row.
Yeah. Fuck YouTube is right. We're on YouTube as a necessity, trying to launch the channel a little bit, trying to get the show out there a little bit. We're going to get kicked off eventually, which is fine. It seems like we're under the radar right now with our massive audience of 31 subscribers. But yeah, so Keep It Simple Bitcoin, one of my favorite channels, did some awesome content, just got kicked off this week for violating terms of service, which essentially means the dictators at Google just didn't like him for some reason. And yeah,
he made too many helpful tutorials.
He was doing some meaningful work to really undermine the state. 31 strong, that's right. Big audience. We got an awesome audience. That's what matters. And that's kind of the route that I've taken in Isaiah Job, the article that I've been referencing, we'll probably reference multiple times tonight and last week. It talks about this idea of like going and reaching the remnant, and how you'll have a much smaller audience and group of people, but it's going to be a lot more meaningful. You're talking to people that are willing to listen without having to water down a message is powerful. Yeah,
absolutely.
So,
yeah, this week I wanted to start off by thanking everyone who has been calling their congressmen, talking to politicians. You guys are really doing the Lord's work. This is really important. There's some regulations that came out that said every transaction of $600 or more is going to go to the IRS. Without all that hard work, that could have easily been, as low as maybe $550 or something like that. So thank you guys. We really, really appreciate that. Yeah, you guys are really having an effect. So keep talking to politicians. Keep giving them, I don't know, whatever. I just wanted to talk shit.
No, that's great. Yeah, I think the people lobbying Ted Cruz did a good job. Ted saved us from $300 reporting.
Yeah.
He doubled it.
Yeah.
$600 now.
Ted Cruz personally stepped in. You heard it here. Breaking news, and raised that limit of tyranny from $300 to $600. So without Ted Cruz, you wouldn't be able to buy. Let's see, what's between 3 and 5. You wouldn't be able to buy an average introductory handgun without having that be reported. So thank you, Ted Cruz.
Yeah.
Really, really appreciate it. We've completely forgiven you for being directly complicit in murdering children overseas.
And what's really wild about this one too is like the previous reporting standards was $10,000 for cash transactions. I think this is $600 for all transactions. So that's a big step there.
And it came out in the 70s when 10 grand was like actually a significant. I mean, obviously there should not be a limit of any kind, but you know, like 10 grand in the 70s versus 10 grand today versus $600 today. It's like, Jesus. So I don't know. It's people that, yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to take a small little victory lap, right? Just to kick things off.
It's a great victory lap. And, you know, Don is right. Give your money to Ted or you'll have to start buying some single ply toilet paper. And we know that commodities like toilet paper and paper towels are going up in price. Paper towels have outperformed the S&P in 2021, which is you know, pretty fantastic if you're using paper towels as a store of value instead of your stupid 401k or, you know, whatever that's in all these stupid assets that aren't doing anything for you.
Exactly.
But yeah, I like with the news, the headlines about China and the debt ceiling, it seems like, oh, Steve,
yes, that's true. Toilet paper is for peasants. Get some fucking wet wipes. Okay. Toilet paper is for peasants.
I'm still a peasant. That's fine. But with the news of what's happening in China, with that big real estate company going under, and with what's happening with the potential U.S. debt default, it seems like it's a pretty serious time to exit the system and get on the life raft. It's long overdue. It's been pretty obvious for a while that we're coming to a breakdown, but it seems like it's kind of code red, potentially. I don't know. What do you think, Ski?
Oh, shout out to Lurk. He definitely went up to me. He only uses bidets. I do not own a bidet because I am too much of a peasant to own a bidet.
I've been meaning to buy one for a while.
But yeah, no, I think it's going to be interesting. I don't know. I'm not going to pretend like I understand China's financial system, but I just see really like some of the numbers I saw on there. It's like Evergrande alone is 16% of their entire junk bond market and looks to be absolutely and completely insolvent. Another one, they had, I think they said they had 1.4 million separate properties that are like currently in some stage of production, or construction, so somewhere between breaking ground and being completed. And so it's not, you know, like the classic, you know, what they did in 2008, they went and foreclosed, they got a bunch of people's houses and shit. And they can't even, like, what are they're gonna foreclose on a, you know, a half-built apartment building and somehow get their money back out of that. Like, looks, you know, I obviously don't own Evergrande bonds, so I'm feeling pretty good about that, but it's could get very, very ugly. It'd be interesting. And the only reason I'm smiling and laughing is because it's just absolutely indicative of how the CCP runs their economy. And so, you know, these people are like, oh, this is going to be so terrible. It's like, well, if it's not this, it's something else. Like, this is, you know, the Soviet Union was never going to last forever. The American empire sure as hell is never going to last forever. Like, it's probably on its way out. The CCP is not going to last forever. Like, their entire legitimacy is based on being able to provide for people economically. So if that falls apart, very likely it gets real ugly real quick. But yeah, comes down to, yeah. Well, and that's the other thing. I saw something till Don says, from what I understand, it comes down to whether or not the government bails them out. And one of the things I read on this was this guy was basically saying they have this big giant CCP party meeting, coming up, next month or the month after, something like that. And his point was there's no way they let this implode ahead of that. And the takeaway I took from that was just how much confidence these people have in the government's ability to solve these things still. It just blows me away, because it's, people say, oh, the Fed will do this, the Fed will fix that, the Fed will fix, like, you're assuming they still have that power, which maybe they do, maybe they don't, but it's certainly not a foregone conclusion that they have that power. I don't know about their valuation's probably in the shitter. I know that their total debt level is somewhere around 300 billion. So Lurk's question was, isn't their valuation only 30 billion? So I know they have like 30 billion in debt, and they're, roughly a sixth of the entire junk bond market. And my understanding is it's not that they're having some trouble. It's that they're completely insolvent and totally fucked. And something like 2/3 of the assets backing the stuff that they do, of the debt that they do have, is this like incomplete, half an apartment building, a field with a hole in it, like that. Those are the kind of properties that are backing a lot of these bonds.
Yeah. So Don says, I've heard people saying CCP knew real estate market was levered and they're allowing this to happen as a reset. Part of the master plan with breaking up tech companies. And that's a really interesting perspective, because it's been pretty obvious that the Chinese real estate market has been a disaster for a very, very long time. I mean, they're just building cities with nobody living in them, and, people just full on speculating, buying these properties, like expecting them to be stores of value for whatever reason. It's one thing after another. The question is, if they have a major financial collapse, will the CCP still retain its power? And that's been questionable, I think, for a while, as a lot of people in China are very, very unhappy with the CCP. And it's just like one thing after another. I mean, you've got these, every year there's floods, and just tons and tons of people, like hundreds of thousands of people die because they, make decisions to go and flood, a small city, for whatever reason. I mean, central planning always fails. It always fails. And the more centrally controlled something is, the more fragile and inefficient it is, and it's going to fail. And, one thing I think we have to take into consideration here is everything is fragile simultaneously globally. And it just, I think, these things domino, and you've got things like the U.S., potentially defaulting on debt here pretty soon, which would be massive. That would be pretty wild. But Nancy Pelosi throwing a Hail Mary, putting it in, I think, the infrastructure package to raise the debt ceiling is kind of like a last minute thing. And honestly, it kind of seems like a tactically good decision, because if the Republicans go and vote against that, it could create some massive destruction in the United States.
Yeah. So Lurk says total liabilities is over 300 billion for Evergrande, but Lehman's Brothers, for reference, was 810 billion. What I thought was interesting. Yeah, so it's not quite, what is that, ballpark 40% of the scale of infrastructure of the value of the bonds and nominal value. But yeah, and I guess indexed to inflation, what's 810 billion in 2008? What's that worth today?
Yeah,
especially because these are assets, probably a hell of a lot more. So yeah, so that's a good point. So it's in scale, Evergrande specifically, it looks to be significantly smaller than Lehman Brothers. Fun. I don't remember if we talked about this here, but might have been somewhere else. But fun fact, a lot of people don't know about why Lehman Brothers was the one that got the axe, because there were tons of banks in 2008. Bear Stearns was in basically the same position. Tons of banks were in the exact same position. And it goes back to the long-term capital management crisis in 1999, where Dick Fold was basically he was the main opponent of bailing out long-term capital management in 1999, which was, long-term capital was just a bunch of academics and economists and other just raging retards who got together and said, "Oh, we're going to do algorithmic trading. We're so smart. We beat the market. We beat the business. All that kind of typical Keynesian nonsense." And then, of course, they blew up. They lost a ton of money. They were systemically important, so they were, they quote unquote had to be bailed out. And Dick Fold, who was Lehman Brothers CEO, was the guy who said, "No, fuck no. They took a risk. They lost. We're out." And so 20 years later, when they got to figure out whose neck goes on the chopping block, surprise, surprise, who they pick. Like, it's unbelievable how just absolutely corrupt and incestuous that whole space is.
Yeah, it's actually it's absolutely fantastic. It's very, very entertaining to watch this stuff and just watch how inept and corrupt these people are. Like Ben Bernanke sitting on, I think he's sitting on the board of Citadel, which was heavily involved with the whole GameStop debacle, and I think it's putting. Yeah, I mean, before we started, Steve, you were talking about these parents being upset about like the Met Gala, and it's funny because Don's always on the beat posting these things before I see them, so I get my news from Don a lot of times. But
it's a good source.
Yeah, I had no idea what the Met Gala was until I hopped off the stream last week, and then but people are posting these things about being upset about their kids having to wear masks in school, and then these morons, celebritards, go in and partying at the Emmys or the Met Gala without masks on, and then like the servants haven't. And it's kind of like one of these same situations, where people like get all up in arms about, Jerome Powell owning municipal bonds that the Fed is buying to prop up. It's just par for the course. Like all of this stuff is so obvious and has been happening for so long, and it's like. And that's just like, these are very little things, like Steve, you talk about, periodically about how these people are just like murderers. And that's where it's, the real things that we should get upset about, versus, these silly, financial crimes. But we have the power to opt out, and actively like do something about it. And it's like what you talk about is like, if you're unhappy with the schools, and like homeschool your kid, or come up with a better solution than sending them to the schools and getting mad at the school board. And like, if you're tired of this financial bullshit and funding, the wars and stuff, starve the beast, put your money in Bitcoin.
Yeah. Now these are the same people that walk out into a rainstorm and get surprised that they're wet. It's like, what the fuck did you expect? Like I don't know. Like I tweeted today because I was just so annoyed by it. So much conservative nonsense was making its way onto my whatever. I just kept seeing, I don't know. Yeah, like the one that really got me was somebody put a picture of, AOC or whoever, a bunch of rich people, with no masks. The Help has masks, and then it had a picture of a kid in a classroom, and the caption was something like, they don't have to wear, here's what they're doing. And then my kid has to wear a mask at school. And the implication was it's because of these bad people and it's because of the government, because they're a bunch of cuck-servatives. And I was like, no, it's because you're not protecting your kid from abuse. That's why. Like, that's what it boils down to. And I don't know, it's just the abdication of responsibility and this idea that, my kid's getting abused, but I get to blame it on no, you fix it. You figure out how to get them out of that. Like, a kid playing in the yard for 8 hours is far better than whatever indoctrination and masked up nonsense that they would have to endure at school. Like I don't know. I just don't know. Like, and I know it's not easy. It's hard. It's extremely hard, to make something like that happen. But it's like, we're talking about your kid not being abused. Like, what could be more important than that? I don't understand. But
yeah, and I think this is an important time to take action. Like, one of the things that we've seen with there's a lot of resentment that millennials and Zoomers have towards the boomers because they've just been super complacent and allowed a lot of this stuff to happen, and haven't really fought back or done anything meaningful. And, in my opinion, have been cowardly. And I don't think it's a time to be a coward. It's a time to be doing active things. And it's like, there are businesses in Tucson that, when the mask mandates came out and when they tried to shut down the gyms that stayed open, and they stood on the battlegrounds and fought against the health departments. And I think that stuff's incredibly important, and taking it to the next step, even of, accepting Bitcoin as payments, and telling them to go fuck themselves. Like, we're not going to, deal with your regulations and taxes, and we're going to go around this roundabout way of fighting you. I think is incredibly important. And that's something I'm super, super stoked on, is, seeing things like that. And I know a lot of people, don't want to stand up and fight against this stuff, but it's like, what future are you, creating and contributing to? Are we going to sit around on our hands and just like wish that things would magically get better? No, like, I don't like, things change because people take action. And it doesn't mean like going and storming the Capitol, because that's really stupid, but it's going around and doing things that are smart. And this is why the cypherpunk ethos is so incredibly powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the the cypherpunk way of figuring things out is you don't play their game on their terms. You use asymmetric advantages, encryption, now Bitcoin, et cetera, and really, really push areas where you have a ton of leverage. Like like we can secure our wealth in Bitcoin, we can park it in cold storage, and then we can wait out the end of the American empire, and keep buying as much as we can as we go along, helping other people to understand it, getting our privacy game to where it should be. There's just all kinds of things we can do to be continually improving, and continually, doing a better job of securing our future. And we all have tons and tons of room to grow there, but there's just so much opportunity. But at the end of the day, I'm still just incredibly optimistic and excited about where all this goes. It could be, and printing guns, absolutely, Don. Yeah, printing, buying, yeah, however you can get them, do it.
Especially printing guns if you're in California.
Yeah. But yeah, like there's just, I don't know. It's going to be, it could be, I think it could, I've been saying it for a while, but it could just certainly be an ugly short term. But beyond that, I think it just looks absolutely fantastic, because these people are, actually Svetsky had a really good point, maybe this week or last week, of basically the idea of stop calling them elites, like call them what they are: parasites, scum, whatever. And I like that a lot. And I was like, yeah, as soon as I read that, I said, oh yeah, he's 100% right. I need to get that word out of my vocabulary. These are not elites. Like, these are inbred, semi-retarded parasites, and that, have some sort of, by some freak accident of how this whole bullshit fiat system is developed, they have the ability to, they have power and influence. But, Bitcoin is making their ability to accumulate power and resources trend to zero. So yes, Arceris moochers. Welcome, Arceris. Happy to have you.
Yeah, good to have you, Arceris.
Yeah.
Yeah, spineless worms.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just rent seekers. At the end of the day, they're thieves, and they're murderers, and they're pedophiles, and that's another bad word for YouTube. They don't like that one, but it's fine. They're just awful people, and they're the type of people I would never want to associate with. And I think this kind of goes back to like kissing the asses or licking the boots of the politicians and the state. It's like, these are just awful people that why would you ever want to suck up to them? Like, if you encountered them in real life, they wouldn't be contributing anything of value. And yeah, I mean, the AOC's whole tax the rich is so funny, because like, okay, we're going to tax all the people that we've been, allowing to benefit and sit on their asses and not have to do any work, as they just reaping the rewards of the Cantillon effect. And then that we also bail out every time they make a poor economic decision and it blows up in their face. Like, that's a great idea. Good job, AOC, and good job, Elizabeth Warren. You're like, you guys are just complete morons.
Yeah. And I don't know. Like, I'm still, like, I look at like everything that they're doing, and it's almost kind of fun to watch at this point, because, if they, I just see them as these just pathetic, kind of impotent little, I don't know, beings that are just kind of out there, and they're flailing out of control. They can see their power going away. They can see their ability to influence going away. Like you see it a lot in, the people realizing, like I don't know, I don't want to talk too much about the vax, but it's just like, you see the vax mandates and people are realizing it's not working. They're like, well, but he signed a piece of paper. I thought that, everybody who worked at a big company was going to get vaccinated all of a sudden. And that was, the discussion last week. I think a big point I had trouble getting through was there's a massive, massive difference between what gets written down on a piece of paper, and what, sovereign people do in their day-to-day life. Like I would go so far as to say like the two have almost nothing in common.
Yep.
And so when they talk about, well, what if they come out with this mean law, or what if they do this or do this or do that? Yeah, they are evil psychopaths who will do what evil psychopaths do. Like I'm continually lowering my, finding new ways to lower my expectations for them. And I don't care. I'd tweeted today, basically that the idea that the correct approach for NPCs, non-player characters, people that just don't have a mind, I think is to treat them literally like dogs, And the example I used, I said, if I see a hungry one, I'm going to feed it. I'm kind to dogs. I'm always kind, I'm nice to dogs. Like I'll feed them, I'll, pet them, scratch their ear, but I'm not gonna pretend like they have a valid perspective. And the example I used was like, I'm not gonna ask a corgi what rights I should have or what firearms I should own. Like that's hilarious. And that I think is the approach to take to, anybody who takes politics serious, anybody who thinks that a piece of paper determines what Bitcoiners can or cannot do. I just think it's like, no, like just picture them as a corgi, some, relatively, not dangerous, just like a cute little thing. And, it's going to bark. It might be kind of annoying. But, you just give a little pat on the head, maybe a scratch on the ear, and then go on your way. And it's just like, we cannot take these people serious, or at least I refuse to. I definitely refuse to pretend like they have a mind or a valid perspective.
Yeah, and I think that's funny. And I just try and disassociate as much as possible. Like I really don't enjoy or interacting with people that just throw like whatever the court whatever the curated narrative is at me. I just don't find that enjoyable, and I find it like just incredibly tedious and a waste of time. And so that's my perspective of like, this is why I find Bitcoin meetups so invigorating, and I try to make as many as I can, and go to probably 3 a month around Arizona. And I think that's those are my people, the people that get it, people that are on the path of liberty and freedom, for real, instead of just whining about it. And I think we just have to be comfortable, or learn to be comfortable with the idea that we're all criminals. Yeah. Like if you're a person, like freedom is always illegal. It's something that Larkin Rose talks about. I mean, and it kind of goes back to like, how do we create change? And if you look at what happened with marijuana in this country, like people just completely disregarded the prohibition. And it was just so, like when I was a kid, it was easier to buy pot than it was to buy alcohol.
Yeah.
And it wasn't good as me being a 14, 15-year-old kid smoking pot, but I think that is, a powerful way to look at it. And, how much money has been trying to lobby Congress to legalize it for how long, and it's just failed. And, it may not get to that point. Like the U.S. may collapse before pot is legal, which is kind of a funny thing to think about. But I think that's just the perspective that we need to have, is like, on top of that, like in regards to Bitcoin and regards to freedom, like at this point, it's about self-preservation, and the stakes are a lot higher than just wanting to like smoke pot. The stakes are about preserving your future, preserving your family's stability, and, actually like moving towards something that's worth living for, instead of just being in a, open air prison. And that's the battle. And I think, yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to somebody recently about she'd lived in Guadalajara for a really long time and was actually like from there. I don't know if she's born there. Definitely like raised there, lived there a really long time, and was talking about how like the thing that was really like one of the things that was really appealing about Mexico is that and I've hopped across the border. I've never actually been to Mexico in a real way, so all I'm doing is shamelessly plagiarizing what she said. But basically, the point was it's like there's this just massive, just like absolutely blatant disrespect of the government apparently throughout Mexico. And like just making the point, it's like most people don't pay taxes. Like most people, like you ask people like, oh, are you following the regulations? Like, paying your taxes? Like, well, fuck no. I'm gonna let these people tell me how to live my life. Are you crazy? Come on, get out of here. And like going through and like talking about how, it's like people, because they're, it's I don't know, it's like this idea of, it's like corruption in a place like Mexico is so much more accessible to the average everyday person.
Yeah.
It's like you get a ticket, it costs this much. You want a business, it costs this, et cetera. Whereas here, corruption's accessible only to the really rich people. And, another guy I knew who's from Romania had like a similar point about Romania he was the first one that kind of introduced me to this idea and got me thinking about it. But it's this idea that, it's like these countries are far less corrupt than the U.S. Because the ability to just go through your life, and kind of route around the state, is much more accessible to average everyday people who are, if somebody's, in poverty, they probably can't afford bribes, but, lower middle class, certainly middle class and above, can comfortably, afford kind of whatever kind of bribes they need just to kind of get through their life, and obviously the ideal is there is no state and we don't have to deal with any of that either, but comparatively it seems like a much more attractive spot and a much more attractive proposition. And I just really liked that idea of that there's like a really significant part of the population there, and I'm sure in other places that just doesn't, it's not even like they're libertarians or anarchists or whatever. They're just sensible people who recognize bullshit when they see it, is more or less I think what it seems to me to boil down to.
Yeah, I don't know how much I agree with the idea that there isn't a lot of people circumventing the state here. And like Tucson in particular, it's pretty big as far as like the cash economy, people not paying taxes, and you get into the underserved communities that have been really, stifled. Their success and prosperity has been really hurt by the state and their actions, and those people are really, good at using cash only and doing these things, and it's something that I find really awesome about those groups and communities, and it's something I love to see. Like I love talking to a business owner that says I pay my employees in cash so they don't have to pay taxes. Like that gets me so excited. And specifically when you look at countries like Mexico, there's this really interesting book called Why Nations Fail, and a big reason why it is the way it is, and you look at the rest of South Central America, they have really high corporate taxes and they have really high barriers of entry into legal markets, and that's why you get a lot of the underground stuff. And so they have all of these industries that are cartelized, and that and a big part of that too is just like lack of access to financial services. That's a huge thing that creates these industries and illegal underground industries. Like if you look at immigrants in the U.S., they can't go and get a mortgage. They can't go and take a car loan out until they're legal citizens, whether they're illegal or here on a green card. And a lot of them, it's difficult to get there. A lot of people coming to the U.S. Legally and illegal are entrepreneurs. It's a lot higher rate than natural born citizens. And if you can't go get a business loan, you're probably going to, or you're more incentivized to go and do these things under the table that have quick cash. And so it's it's interesting. I think like if you look at South Central America, they're trying to implement things like raise corporate taxes, raise taxes in general. They're trying to squeeze out cash transactions as much as possible, and they're doing these stupid things with minimum wage laws, and it's going to create similar circumstances that we've seen there. And I think the illicit markets are going to grow. I think, we've already seen that. Like I know a handful of people that started selling drugs in the pandemic while they're sitting on unemployment because they lost their jobs. And it's, they're one of the guys I know is specifically selling pot, and pot is legal, in Arizona. And it's just like, you create these barriers to entry in markets, like with the pot market in particular. Like, they don't have access to banking. They have to use mostly cash transactions. Some of them are getting on the Bitcoin train, which is cool. But they have all these stupid taxes and regulations on it that make it, profitable to still sell it illegally. And, it's just what it creates. I think it's awesome. It's moving us towards a free market.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I was reading about a while ago, the black market for weed in California is significantly larger than what is the good version? Is that white market?
Yeah, I guess
I've
that would be
never
the
thought
term.
about this.
Yeah.
the legal, yeah, I guess white market. I've never thought about that term. Anyway, brain fart. But no, anyway, the black market is just way bigger than the legal market, and it's because, like, part of it's because they can actually charge significantly more for black market weed because there aren't regulations that make it shitty and full of poison, and so tons and tons and tons of people are willing to buy quote unquote black market. I mean, what's the penalty in California for half an
Black market's the free
you.
market.
Yeah, free market, formal market. That makes sense. But it's, I mean, just using weed as an example, but it's, there's huge, like I was reading about one specifically, this big, huge grower who had just warehouses and warehouses and warehouse, and was a totally legit operation. And he just was like, hey, just so tired of the headache that, like, slowly, one by one, converted his warehouse where he's like, okay, we're not, this one we're going off the books, then this one we're going, and it's like a significant part of his operation he had moved to off the books just because he didn't want to deal with the regulations. I was reading about him specifically because, like, he didn't feel like he could grow, and he was like kind of an ideological purist on weed specifically, but it's like his point was he can't grow good weed with the regulations because he's like, they want me to do this, and it just fucks everything up. And so I don't know. I thought that was an interesting idea, but it's like even in a place like California that's had legal weed for quite a while now, there's a huge black market and a significant, minority of people who are willing to take massive risks. I mean, you get caught with a half an ounce in California, that probably won't even pull you over, or they probably won't even give you a ticket, but you get caught with a warehouse, I imagine that's probably a slightly different equation.
Yeah. There's a term, I think, for what's happening, and it's called Anarch Tyranny, and it's essentially like they create these circumstances for lawlessness and chaos, and then they selectively enforce. And you just saw that with, like, the riots that were happening. Like, some people get away with burning down cities, and other people get beat up and detained, depending on political views. And and it's not the case for everybody, but you just saw, like, the framing of, who they're putting resources behind. They're upset at the, militia groups in Michigan that are upset with the lockdowns. But it's okay if you go and burn down Minneapolis. And I'm not, like, trying to make a political statement here of, like, I'm on the right or on the left, but you just see the selective enforcement that happens. And I think that is what's going to happen with, like, these reporting laws. It's not about ensuring that they increase taxes. It's so that they can go after people that are inconvenient to their narrative and censor them more easily, is what I think it is.
Yeah, and I think it's super optimistic and bullish for what we're trying to, being Bitcoin people collectively are trying to do. Well, not collectively, that's a dirty word in Bitcoin, but
simultaneously,
what Bitcoin people want to see happen, which is just people wake up to just how stupid a lot of this stuff is. It's like, why did 12 people control the money supply? Why, all these questions that we've been kicking around for years, or anyone, even not in Bitcoin, anybody from the Ron Paul camp or something like that, like it's people that have really started to think through, like, no, central banking is fundamentally evil, corrupt, and stupid. Having a federal government is fundamentally evil, corrupt, and stupid. And it's just like the more, when people are slapped in the face with something, they're like, wait, that just doesn't make any sense at all. And they have to either, figure out, well, okay, well, what's the answer to that, and which hopefully leads them to Bitcoin, or they have to, do what most people do and just kind of ignore it and go with the flow. But like we've talked about last week and the week before, like this is not a majority movement. We're not trying to get to 51%. Like the statistic I like that I mentioned last week is 3 to 5%. Like I think if we can get 3 to 5% of the population being sovereign, ideally with Bitcoin, I think that's more than enough to fundamentally change the direction of the whole society, and also to create these parallel systems, also that we talk about, these parallel markets and things that people can opt into or not.
Yeah, we're not going to 51% attack the state. No, that's for sure. But yeah, it's the stuff coming out of Australia is pretty interesting to watch. I mean, the protests. I just have this feeling that they get a win, and it's pretty encouraging to see some cops get beat up that are doing awful things to people. But just long-term strategy is just such a poor decision. Yeah. I think on my part or on their part. But yeah, I'm gonna be. They had some protests in Arizona. I think they were mostly centered up in Phoenix about the mandates. I haven't heard a lot about it. I'll probably hear some more about it tomorrow when I go to my Libertarian Party meeting. It's probably going to be popping because the missile makers decided to vax mandate. I don't know if
I saw you put the thing in the chat that Raytheon did.
Yeah.
And I think I saw what General Dynamics is another contractor that they, I don't know if they reversed it or not, but they at least had initially said they were not going to do the vax mandate because they had something like 40% of their employees say we'll walk out over this. And, my thought on that was, oh, they're cool with being complicit, this whole, they're fine with being complicit in war and creating things that get used to kill civilians and, that kill people for being brown and living on the wrong side of an imaginary line. All that's fine. But the vaccine is where they draw the line, apparently. So
yeah, I mean, there's just that story this week about the Biden administration killing those aid workers in Afghanistan with that drone strike. Like that's what happens, and you're kind of perpetuating the system of awfulness, and I think it kind of goes like it's interesting. So like on the topic, like we've been kind of shilling black markets and illegal activity. I think it's important to preface, like, for some people that, might not be as in line with like what we're talking about is like, we believe in morals. We believe in doing what's morally right. And there's a big differentiation between what's legal and what's moral and what the state tells you to do versus what is the right thing to do. And, being able to differentiate that, like, I don't smoke pot. I don't grow pot yet. And I'm not like a big fan of drugs, but I think it's immoral to put people in cages, and I'm not going to support the system that does that. And I think you can be against something, but think that it's morally irreprehensible to be, the laws are just ridiculous, and not being compliant with it. I think that's an important thing to preface in this conversation.
Yeah, and it's super. How many people outsource their thinking to the media or the state, which is essentially what they do. And it's like I was talking to somebody relatively recently, and they were basically the discussion was about kids, and the discussion was basically it's like, how do you raise your kids to be and they said, literally, they even used the phrase law-abiding citizen, but they said, how do you raise your kids to be good law-abiding citizens? And I had like this visceral reaction to it. It's like, oh God, ugh, like why would I want that? And they're like, what do you, you want them to be immoral, and so we got into the whole like, what's legal and what's moral are two completely separate things, and so I said what I want is for them to be, moral human beings who, subscribe, things like natural law are super important, that there's one baseline set of there's one baseline reality that we all subscribe to, there things are moral or they are not, and there's yeah, but yeah, just that these things are, they are black and white, and the state has nothing to say on, the topic of whether something is immoral. It's a whole entity that's immoral from its very foundation, and I don't know, taking pointers from them on how we should live our life. I mean, it's like we need to operate our lives to make sure that we don't end up in a cage, but like making sure that we're, not letting them determine how we, how we live, how we do all these different things. I think is super important.
Yeah. And, like the cages may be inevitable. And if I do end up in a cage, I'd like to hang out with Ross Ulbricht. He's in the Tucson prison. But yeah. Yeah.
That's a good point from Arceris.
Yeah, that was exactly went through my mind. So good law-abiding citizens in 1938 Germany wouldn't have saved Anne Frank.
Yeah.
And that's a fantastic point. And I think, you even go into other aspects of American history. Like these atrocities have happened here. Like we put a bunch of Japanese people in internment camps or concentration camps. That stuff's gonna happen.
Yeah. Native Americans.
Yeah, Native Americans. Yeah, they keep on like, we've always like lauded Western culture as being like so amazing and superior, but we've done some pretty awful things, and it's just the things that happen under the guise of the state. Like they keep on finding, they had these Native American schools where they essentially, took the kids from the parents in order to create cultural genocide, similar stuff that's happening in China right now with the Uyghurs. And they keep on digging up dead bodies of kids in Canada, and this stuff is just morally irreprehensible. And like what it takes is for somebody to be able to stop and critically think, like, is this the right thing? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't have the capacity to do that. And I think most of us are prone to kind of following our marching orders, and it's an unnatural thing to do. Like one of the things that, for me has been really eye-opening is reading about the experiment. Wasn't it Stanford? I don't know. Well, there's the Stanford prison experiment where they took the guards and they just took like, I don't know, like let's pick a random, like 24 people, and they're like 12 of you are guards and 12 of you are prisoners, and they're just normal people. And they conducted this experiment, and what ended up happening is the guards ended up doing awful things to people that were prisoners that had not done anything wrong, just because they'd been given authority. And then there's the other one that happened, like the shock experiment, where they had the guy sitting in the room. And, I think it's important, like when looking at things like that and examples like that, to be able to relate to the person that, like, I have the capacity to be that person that's inflicting pain on somebody else. Mm-hmm. And, being aware of that being a possibility, and like taking the steps of like to critically think and say, I can be the one doing evil things. I need to bring my conscience into this, and to critically think on, is this the proper thing to do to another person? Are the people that are telling me to demonize, the other individual, is there any merit to this argument? Like, if probably not in this case, and unfortunately, like what we're seeing right now is a lot of people are being demonized and they're feeling bad about it, instead of having been on, the forefront of this, looking at the war on terror and looking at what happened to Muslim people that were just, detained for absolutely no reason and framed by the FBI. It's just, this stuff's been happening for forever, and it's a result of state and the state authority, and people being given badges.
Yeah, and we're more empowered today than ever to subvert that, awful stuff. And I don't know. And we have more information. You know, it's like less and less of an excuse to still be asleep on all these different things. And you know, it's like that, like the shock. I think it's called the Milgram something or other experiment. It's like these experiments show that like a significant, probably majority of the population, like I believe in that shocking one, I think it was something like 60% of the people uh, went all the way towards actually what they thought was killing the person, because the authority figure told them not, told them, keep going, he deserves it, or whatever the structure was. And like I think we need to be aware of that, because it takes an absolutely tremendous amount of courage and inner work to not be the person that looks the other way when the Nazis are taking power, to not be the person that says, oh, what am I going to do? Stick my neck out so my neighbor doesn't go to the gulag, like to not be that weak, completely immoral person takes a tremendous amount of courage and inner work. And that's, like the number of people that make that jump, I think is probably, the top end is probably somewhere in that 3 to 5% range. Because most people will go along and will just kind of comply. And that's what we've seen.
You have to put yourself in a position of danger and risk to be that person. And it's a scary thing. And there should be, some moral turmoil that happens in that process. Like, unless you're just, a crazy berserker that gets off on fighting against the state. And there's some people like that. But yeah, it's a difficult thing to do. Like, most of the things that we talk about are difficult things. Fighting against this, established power that has endless resources when you have very limited resources is an incredibly difficult thing to do. And there has to be a powerful end goal in mind, and I think like one of the things that's incredibly powerful about Bitcoin is the transformation that people go through in the process, discovering it and having like stable financial foundation to build off of, to be able to attain this, what they call self-actualization, when you get to step into a higher purpose and calling. And I think that's, really special about this community and the people in it, is that you're surrounding yourself with people that are stepping into, and it doesn't mean that we all have the same, purpose and calling. Not everybody might be so gung-ho about ending the state, but it's solving real problems that matter, like Arceris is in the chat. Good dude.
Yes.
Talking about like regenerative agriculture, stuff like that. It's incredibly important. We're seeing the destruction of the ecosystem and the food supply. And yeah.
And there's so many people that are using Bitcoin as part of their toolkit to make the world such a better place. That's a perfect example. And it's just so many reliably good people. Like I have a very good friend who started going to, who's a female, started going to the Austin Bit Devs meetup a while ago. And just to know, like, okay, I know a good number of people there, whatever, but I know that is a safe place for her to go, which is not the case with most meetups, and then it's like, they always go to that Cooper's barbecue afterwards, which is like a bar or whatever. Like, to know that a bar full of Bitcoiners is a very safe place for a woman to go, because half those guys are, married, but also just like, like I think a good number, would be ready to curb stomp somebody if they were not curb stomp, but just like would be like, any kind of harassment, abuse, like whatever, would not fly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure a good number are carrying, even though it's Texas and Texas LARPs on liberty, but still. But it's just like that. Like, what other? I haven't found another. Like, maybe jujitsu might be the only other potentially parallel kind of community where just the average quality of human, and I'm not talking about smart or any nonsense like that. Like, who cares about that? But just like the average quality and just general life competence of people is absolutely off the charts. And yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to hear if anybody has found that elsewhere. But Bitcoin is even in a whole other universe over jiu-jitsu. But jiu-jitsu is the only one I can think of that, somewhat of a parallel. And that's when I don't do it, but my kids go, 3-4 times a week, and just the kids that are there, everything is just fantastic. The parents.
I got a lot of respect for the jiu-jitsu community, but I've got a good friend that's has his own dojo, and I like to make fun of him and call it ground karate. And yeah, Lex Friedman's a
Black belt.
BJJ black belt.
It's true.
Just to put it into perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a shitcoiner that came to one of the Tucson meetups one time, and he was coming off a horrible experience at another meetup where a bunch of people were just riding bikes. And so they asked for proof of vaccination. This is a couple months ago, even. They're riding bikes outside. They want proof of vax. And then they tried to force him to wear a mask. And he was telling me how he had this medical experiment. He has a medical condition, not experiment. I don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe an experiment. Who knows? But and he's just like looking for solid people to hang out with that won't like shove bullshit down his throat. And it just blew my mind, that like that would have never crossed my mind. Like, show me your papers. Like, I don't think I've ever asked anybody in my life to show me their papers. And I just couldn't believe it. And these people like kicked him out of the group because he medically couldn't get the vax. And it just, this is scum of the earth.
Yeah. It's just these people have outsourced their thinking, and they're the people that are to be treated like a corgi. It's just like cannot pretend like they have a valid perspective or anything to contribute it to.
Don't associate
a worthwhile conversation.
Yeah, I don't think it's important not to associate with people like that.
And that's another, I think, a really huge upside of kind of all this craziness is they're really, really, really heavily incentivizing freedom of association, which I think is beautiful. I mean, it's like, like there's a place, Vivo Coffee, Southeast Tucson. If you're ever in Tucson, go get coffee there. I mean, it's a place that has said, no, we're not doing any of these dumb rules. And so because of that, it's become a bit of a gathering. Like I've gone there to, to work for the day a couple of times, and I need to go there more. But it's become a bit of a gathering place for sensible people. And they're conservatives through and through. They've got big Dinesh D'Souza advertisements and, all that kind of stuff. But it's like they're sensible, reasonable, good people. And they're not trying to control anyone. They're just trying to sell coffee and run a business, which is apparently a revolutionary thing to do in this time. But yeah, it's like we are incentivized and empowered to find people whose values align with ours, and we can spend money with those people and stop funding our own oppression. It's like, why would I go spend money somewhere that doesn't treat me how I want to be treated? I'm not. And so I think the more that we can do that, the more we can kind of build out these parallel systems, which is super, super exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, and one of the things that we're starting to see too is a lot of, solid Bitcoin businesses are popping up. Like it's been amazing to see the response to Coinbase and how shitty they are. All the cool exchanges that have come up, like River and Swan, and I think that's just the tip of the iceberg, of what's coming around the pike. I mean, you see like Start9's a company that I really enjoy. It's cool to sit down with Will Reeves and talk about his thinking with Fold, how the whole rewards industry is just total bunk garbage, and how you can actually implement these things in a good way. And I think there's going to be these corrections, and I think a powerful thing is going and patroning these companies and really getting behind them. And you see this, I mean, you see like Swan doesn't have a ton of marketing, Fold doesn't have a ton of marketing, they have a little bit more than Swan, but what they do is they take they really support the community, and the community really supports them. And I think that's what we're going to see in the system or economies of future. Everything's going to be built on reputation, and you're going to have loyal customers and loyal individuals because you're a good company and you're a good human being. And there'll always be the case of the people that go and like try and cancel you just because they don't like you for whatever reason, or like mudsling or slander. But you're going to have those, and that's different than what you see today, because you have the people around you that stick with you through this. they know you. They've been, associating with you, have a relationship with you that's real, and they're like, oh yeah, fuck those guys. Like, they can say whatever they want. I'm still showing up, and I have your back.
Mm-hmm. Do we have anybody in spaces?
We got Pope, but Pope is not an invited Pope to speak. I don't know.
Okay.
Pope was here last week, kind of talking with us about whether we should lobby the politician.
Okay.
I feel like there was another really funny thing that happened with politicians. Oh, yeah. Gavin Newsom didn't get recalled. I was going to talk about that. This is like another example of how these things backfire. There was a big recall effort. Gavin maintained his power somehow. Blows my mind. But now he's coming out and punishing people. He's like, we need to double down on the lockdowns and bullshit.
Did you see that Babylon Bee ran an article? The headline was something to the effect of Larry Elder's campaign and scandal after old pictures are discovered of him in blackface. It's just like the Babylon Bee. But
those guys are so funny.
Cracked me up, like the stuff they come up with. Their podcast is reasonably good. I know, we shit on Michael Malice because of Bitcoin stuff, but he did a couple of episodes on the Babylon Bee podcast that are very, very good and worth checking out. I
didn't realize that. I watched their podcast periodically.
Yeah, the Michael Malice ones are good. They get into because those guys are, they're very devout Christians, and so they kind of get into that with Michael Malice, why he's not, and all that kind. It's very interesting.
One thing that's interesting about Michael Malice is he seems to be coming around to Bitcoin. He recently said on a live stream that he did, I think it was on Monday, or today's Monday, Sunday or Saturday, that he said that he thinks crypto is the best way to undermine and circumvent the state, and crypto, he doesn't get it yet.
Yeah,
but that's a pretty powerful statement.
He's good buddies with Bitstein, though. I mean, he's
interesting.
Like he and at I read a story. Bitstein was going to go on Malice's podcast a couple of years ago, maybe 2020, maybe not quite 2 years ago, but definitely before all this, a lot of this recent stuff led by Vake. Shout out to Vake, getting the libertarians holding their feet to the fire, doing an excellent job with that. But anyway, before all that really blew up, I guess Bitstein was supposed to, I forget why exactly it didn't work out. But yeah, no, because I mean, he and, Bitstein, Pierre, those guys were in New York for a really long time. So I guess somehow in there, Bitstein and Malice got to be relatively good buddies. So he's certainly been exposed to the ideas for a very long time. And yeah, I would guess that he has understood the value proposition of Bitcoin for years. He just doesn't, I don't know, he just feels like it's not his shtick or whatever. Like, there's just other stuff that he wants to talk about. And that's, I don't know, I guess that's a difference of opinion on strategy and everything. But.
Babylon Bee, latest news, January 6 rioters identify as pedophiles, so FBI will cover for them and look the other way.
Those guys are ruthless.
They're so good. I grew up in a very, very Christian household, and I would identify as a Christian today, so their language of their stuff just resonates so deeply with me. It's just so special to see this stuff. There's some pretty down to earth people. Another good headline on Babylon Bee. Update: drone strike thought to have taken down ISIS actually hit a Chuck E. Cheese in Ohio. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's been fun. It's been fun to watch them from what they, because I remember when they very first started and came out, and they were like this, like they basically just did a bunch of Christian inside jokes, and so was their thing. I think it started as just a Twitter account, and they were doing Christian inside jokes, and now it's turned into, I don't know. I was gonna say it really, I don't know. At this point, I think they're doing better work than The Onion, which is borderline blasphemous in my world because I'm a ride or die for the Onion for a very, very long time. Like they were a physical newspaper in Austin before they ever were a website or anything. But,
Yeah, one of my favorite pastimes is taking the Onion's like news reports, their videos, and showing people and presenting it as real news, and watching them just like lose their minds as they think it's real.
Yeah.
Like there was one that they did a few years ago, making fun of Stop and Frisk in New York, and it was called Stop and Kiss, and the cops would just go and start like making out with random people on the streets, and I'd show people like, man, can you believe New York? And they'd get so upset. It was like,
and NYPD's getting out of control, man.
yeah, I mean, it just kind of like goes to the idea of like you present something as news and people just believe it. But I mean, that kind of puts into mind like Babylon B is, you know, a much better source of truth than the actual corporate news right now.
Well, and we learned that from Jon Stewart. You know, how long ago was that? Like he was, yeah, I don't know. That's the thing that's been the weirdest kind of struggle for me, like 2020 and 2021, is how many people, you know, that I know, even people in Bitcoin or whatever, that think, you know, all this nonsense is something new, or that like something changed. Like I don't even think anything changed with Trump. Like I don't think we've learned anything new in the last, 5 years easily, but I could certainly go 10 or more. And it's just it's we're watching the continuation of the same trends that have been going on, and they're just being implemented a little bit different. And so like these people are like, oh my gosh, can you believe, you know, the government this, and you know, oh that it appears, you know, the federal government doesn't believe in the rule of law, or it's like, oh, do we not have the Constitution anymore? It's like all this. It's like, what are you talking about? Like it's been an absolute dumpster fire for a very long time, and it's been hilarious for a very long time. It's like I said. How Jon Stewart was on the air? I think 16 years, and he left 5 years. You know, so he would have started like 20 years ago, and he's just one example. There's tons of examples like that. You know, Stephen Colbert before he got absolutely cucked by whatever network he's on. I don't even know, CBS or NBC or whichever one it is, and it's just like the people that haven't, I don't know, it's almost like I'm just sitting here like waiting for people to wake up, because it's, you know, it's like if somebody hasn't figured it out by now, I'm like, I don't have anything for you. Like if you haven't figured it out, I can't explain it to you, because it's abundantly clear to me that, you know, what's going on, and I can't even envision another scenario like where somebody that, you know, views CNN as something other than a, you know, worthless pile of nonsense that plays in the airport sometimes. Like I can't relate. Oh, not anymore.
No, they don't have the money to pay for that anymore.
Yeah, it's just like, and that's a perfect example. Like the cathedral is burning. These, you know, they're not elites. They're parasitic scum. They're on the ropes. They're slowly becoming aware of how irrelevant and how powerless they are, and it's a beautiful thing to watch. It's, you know, we're watching, you know, individuals be empowered at scale in real time, and it's super fun and super awesome to see. And you know, we would have been on a similar trend without Bitcoin, but Bitcoin obviously, you know, just takes it into a whole other universe as far as what people can actually do. You know, it's like we've been seeing technological empowerment since before Bitcoin, but then, you know, to be able to do that with money and to do that with sovereignty over your wealth, that's, you know, that's a whole other. That's what gives me confidence that we can win. Without it, I'd be like, I don't know, it's going to be pretty close. I think we can probably make it work, but it's going to be pretty close. And then you bring Bitcoin into the equation, and it's like, oh yeah, no, their days are numbered. This is funny. Watch the show. You know, the cathedral's burning. It's a good show. Get your popcorn.
Yeah, I mean, the thing though about the cathedral burning is we're going to see the totalitarianism ramp up. And things are going to be pretty uncomfortable. You know, it's like the same thing. Like Gavin Newsom is out of control. Like he's ramping down, shutting things down because that's what these sociopaths do when they're losing power. And it's kind of interesting to look at that and like, how do we prepare what's coming in the future. I mean, I'm prepared to not be able to fly on a plane for a long time. I'm prepared to have my bank account shut down. I'm prepared for, a lot of the get kicked off, as like we were joking earlier about getting kicked off of YouTube. It's just an inevitability for us. And so working out ways around that, like the show will go on no matter what.
Luckily we can get our entire audience on a group text. So
yeah,
we're good.
There's tons of ways that we can go about it. Babylon B, Gavin Newsom named U-Haul salesperson of the year.
Jeez.
They're so
good.
I don't know how they come up with so many brilliant minds over there.
There's some people that, so Norm Macdonald's another one. You talk about somebody who can crank out jokes. I mean, I know I didn't post it because I thought I would get yanked for copyright violation. I'll put it in our Toxic Airwaves Telegram. But there's a video of him on Dennis Miller back in like the 90s. And he's talking about how Joe Camel, the cigarette mascot, looks like a cock. And he's like, you know how with most subliminal advertising, it's like, it's like it's a camel, but you can kind of see the. He's like, here it's totally opposite. It's hard to find the camel, and he's going on and like it's just like so ridiculous, but you can tell it just pops into his head, and then he's just going on and on and on. You're talking about like he comes up with joke after joke after joke after joke, and he had so many. He had I don't know, and his show. He had a show. I don't know if it was on Netflix or what, but there was a whole segment that was just jokes that him and I'm sure he had a couple of writers and stuff, but just they would just come up with one-liners, and just some people, they have a mind for it, but they also cultivate that, and just the amount of volume of just absolutely top tier stuff that they can crank out is pretty awesome.
Yeah, I need to get back on trolling on the internet. I've been pretty successful at it. I like the Ken M style of things where you just pretend to be really stupid, and people lose their minds. And this is part of the reason why I don't love the bandwagon on, idiots like Chris Sky, that are Steve Hankey, that are out there, Peter Schiff, because I feel like they're just engagement trolling. It's like, oh, you just tweet something negative about Bitcoin. Next thing you know, you just have a dog pile of people, engaging with your stupidity. And I mean, that's just the way I think a lot of times. Like, I'll go out there and, say something really stupid. Like I had a troll account on Facebook. Is definitely one of the best places to troll, hands down. And I had a fake account that I was talking about how ridiculous like pedestrians are, and like how we should ban pedestrian travel, and like how, and just the replies that I got were just so unbelievable. Or talking about like how children should be allowed to vape. Like we need to like bring nicotine juice into the middle schools, and people just absolutely lose their minds and go bonkers. This stuff's so funny.
Joe Rogers does an excellent job trolling on LinkedIn. I tried to join him, and I made it about a week, and 13 seconds in, I remembered why I deleted LinkedIn a very long time ago. Well, not super long, but a while ago. And
I used to be a LinkedIn shill. I don't know why. LinkedIn's like the utter worst. Like I probably have had 5 people reach out to me to suggest or like offer to launch a token. And now what I'm getting is like people asking to come on my podcast to shill their shitcoin, and that's like the extent of my LinkedIn engagement, and it's a pretty terrible platform.
Oh, the whole thing's a Dilbert cartoon. I mean,
there's this guy named Andrew Howard that I really enjoy. He posts some good stuff on LinkedIn. He's like the only person. For some reason, his Twitter stuff doesn't show up in my feed, but I see all this LinkedIn stuff. Yeah. Well, time to wrap up.
I think so. Yeah.
Trying to think of stuff coming up. We have a secret meetup coming up this Saturday, which I'm pretty stoked about. Creating change. Brian Harrington's coming out to Phoenix for Halloween, and I'm excited about that one.
Is that 20. There you go ahead. What's the date?
October 16th.
16th. Okay.
And I'm actually, kind of like circling back to, I think like one of the best things to do with Bitcoin is to buy it non-KYC,
Yes.
hold it in cold storage. But I'm really excited about his company choice, because what it's allowing for people to do is like to exit their stupid 60/40 portfolios without getting hit super hard by taxes. And I think like it's been something I've been shilling my boomer parents about. If you have boomer parents, or have people that for whatever reason aren't orange pilled enough to actually make a good decision with their money, and still want it, Choice is a company that allows you to roll over without penalty into 401k and then self custody it. They got tons of ways you can do that. What they're pushing for is multi-sig, which is pretty cool. But I think that's kind of a powerful tool right now. It's like just another ramp off the sinking ship.
My understanding is too, they're working with Compass to be able to let you put minors in an IRA, and then it's the tax treatment of that is the same as like if you had like a real estate income property in your IRA, and so it's like the income from that can stay in the IRA tax free. Like I full disclosure, personally, I don't use any of that stuff because I think they're just going to rate it anyway, and whatever tax guarantees you have are worth their weight in dog shit. Would be my best guess about how things play out over the next 5 or 10 years. I mean, it's like, but I know a lot of people don't share that opinion, and they want to use these tax advantaged accounts and everything like that. And so, if you're gonna do it, I mean, yeah, like you're talking about, if your choice is, choice pun intended, not really. But if your options are, some bullshit 60, where your employer picks the mutual fund and then you get charged out the ass for fees. So that's option one. And then option two is, one of these IRAs that holds a Bitcoin miner, or, that just holds Bitcoin, and you can actually hold the keys and you control it. That's a massive, massive, massive improvement. Senator Warren is trying to nuke the Roth. That does not surprise me at all.
I don't know. She's just a hot bag of air. She never gets anything she wants.
I take it, and that's we talked about, we've shit on the idea of lobbying politicians and things like that. I mean, that's a textbook example of something that they have a ton of control over, like your tax rate, your tax treatment, the tax treatment of your assets based on which account. Like they have tons and tons of power over that, which is why we Bitcoin. But yeah, no, the idea that that a Roth will still be a thing, like people are like, oh, I've got this much money in the Roth, so it'll never be taxed. And it's like, well, I mean, under the current tax code, but if you don't think that's changing in 5 or 10 years, I would humbly submit that you're delusional. Yeah.
That's dope.
Steve Barber building the black box for home mining is super fucking cool. Yes, it is, Lyric. And what's even more awesome is he was like, somebody asked if they could see the specs and the designs for it, and like the way they asked the question, they said, I'll sign an NDA, I just want to review it, like I'm really curious how it works. And he's like, oh, no, the only reason I haven't released it is because it's not finalized yet. It's like, once we're done, I'm tweeting out the design, the spec. You want to make your own, go for it. He's like, literally the only reason I haven't released it yet is just because I want to make sure it's done and good by the time I release it. He's like, no, the whole thing's going to be open source. If you're handy, you'll have the designs. You can build your own. You don't need to buy one from me. Like, these are the only people buying them are, will be the ones that don't want to build it.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just thought that was super cool. I mean, that guy, that's Bitcoin Hank Reardon, as far as I'm concerned, for anybody who's an Atlas Shrugged fan. And then, he's got Denver Bitcoin working with him, who's
I love Denver
very, very, very good friend of mine. Huge, huge fan of that guy. Steve picked a fantastic person to work with, and Denver picked a fantastic place to work. So that's awesome.
I thought that was so funny how they said that based was like a term associated with extremism. I don't know if you saw that. I think it was like DHS put that out or something, some 3-letter agency.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So one last Babylon Bee headline. They had one. They said FDA just reached or something, basically saying the FDA made it clear that the red pill is not FDA approved and you should not take it.
Yes. Yeah, FDA. Yeah, I saw that. That was
The red pill is not FDA approved. Don't take it. It's dangerous.
I think things like that are really important. We need to be laughing right now. It's like they've waged a war against comedy. Like a lot of comedy isn't funny anymore, and there's no funny movies anymore. I think the last one that I saw was, oh, thanks, Gary. Always appreciate your comments on our videos. I don't know if we're gonna blow up. We're talking to the remnant.
Yeah.
What we have here is
appreciate that though, Gary.
I will say, we've been doing, I don't know, this is our 13th show. Yeah. And I forgot to put that in the title, what show we're on. This 13th show, so we haven't been doing it for a couple months now. We've got a cool community here, and I think that's what's important, is we're not trying to, be the next big thing.
And we couldn't do without our sponsor, Dirtbags Bar in Tucson, Arizona. Number one place in Southern Arizona to meet your future ex-wife. And that is a real bar. I've actually never been to it. So I've just driven by, and it I don't know. I was about to say mean things about our fake sponsor, but
yeah.
At some point, we've kicked it and we've mentioned it on here, but at some point we do want to do a live event there. That would be super fun because it's for anybody that doesn't, which is probably pretty much everybody. So it's this bar that's right off campus, right by the Greek area. So it's just crawling with, 20, 21, 22-year-old Greek people, which are
that's something
not my people.
That's something I'm actually working on and brainstorming because the Kaiser event was so much fun. Yeah, I think it's actually pretty easy to pull it off. I don't think you need a ton of resources to host a live event. You just need to find a venue and, hopefully they have some equipment and then you can ask your buddies to show up. We've got some pretty solid people in the Bitcoin scene around here that would draw a crowd, and it's something I'm very, we're going to do. And it's something that we've wanted to do since the inception of the show. It was one of the things Skeef first said, and I'm pretty stoked on. All those girls want to get married at Dirtbags. Yeah.
And it would be super fun. And if, and obviously, everyone knows this, but would not be a money-making endeavor. If we got anywhere close to breaking even, that would be just a raging success in my book.
Yeah. The goal here, this is a revolution.
Yeah.
And, we're treating it as such, and we can have a good time doing it too. But yeah. On the topic of girls getting married, if you're a lonely single out there, the best way to get either dude or chick, the best way to get married, or the quickest way to get married, probably an expensive way too, is to go to a Christian college.
To where?
A Christian college. Oh, yeah. It's so ridiculous.
Do you follow Cernovich at all? So
I don't.
He's a conservative, so he kind of rubs me the wrong way here and there. But he had a really good point. I was listening to him. I forget who he was talking to, but he was talking about. So people don't know. He's I don't know. He's a big conservative writer. He's got a big following. I don't know how many Twitter followers he has or anything like that. But he's somebody who's been making a lot of money off of this kind of stuff for a long time. And he wrote a book called Guerrilla Mindset that's pretty good. But anyway, he was talking about how many young guys will come up to him and they'll say, "Oh, I want to start a family or whatever." And he talks about how almost always what he does is he tells them to become a Mormon, and just as a way to gauge how serious they are, because they'll say, "Oh, I really want to have a family. I really want to, have a bunch of kids or whatever." And say, "Okay, go be a Mormon. You will be married with kids in 36 months, guaranteed." And he's like, and I'm not a Mormon. I don't believe it. I don't think it's true. And I tell them that, I'm not trying to proselytize to them. He's like, but what I'm trying to do is gauge whether or not they actually want that. He's like, because somebody who really does want that will go, "Huh, I hadn't thought about that," and they'll you'll see the wheels spin, you kind of whatever, see that. And he's like, some guy who's, just out there spending $600 a week on bar tabs, buying drinks for bimbos, he's going to write that off immediately. He's just saying, "Oh, I I want to have a, because that's like, the good thing to say, or the right, that's what you should want, or, whatever, all these kind of nonsense reasons. But so ever since I just heard that in an interview maybe a couple of weeks ago, and I've been trying to think about similar propositions and questions like that. They're totally out there off the wall. It's like, oh yeah, go be a Mormon. Like you will. And he even says, he's like, go to a Mormon church, look at the like, dudes, look at how many dudes are like maybe a 4 walking around with like a nice 8 and like 4 kids. He's like, it happens all the time in the Mormon church. And and he's like, you just gotta, like think about it. Think about it. It's an opportunity out there. Consider it. And I don't know. I just thought that was hilarious. But like, I've been trying to think of like questions and propositions like that to get people thinking, because obviously I don't know. I think Mormonism is nonsense, but Mormons are good people, so they don't bother me. I don't have any reason to have any problem with them. I just think they believe silly stuff. But yeah, it's like come up with things like that to just kind of spark people, get people's brains going a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's and what's so effective about that one specifically is it's undeniably true what he's saying. That like if you join, if you're reasonably competent, got a good job, that kind of stuff, and you join a Mormon church, very good chance you will, you'll be married with kids pretty soon if that's what you want. But all right, Gary is asking, is there a link for the meetup in Sierra Vista? I'm in northern Arizona. Depending on where you are in northern Arizona, we do a Phoenix meetup as well, twice a week. And so next one I believe is the 28th.
Yep.
Look up on there's one that we're not affiliated with at all, but it's a good one, at a place called Classic Crust. It's a pizza place, and then the Arizona Bitcoin Network is what Tucson Bitcoin and I are heavily affiliated with. I go up to pretty much every Phoenix meetup, so that would probably be the closest one to you, and then we also do meetups in Tucson, and then Sierra Vista.
I've been really, really wanting to get a meetup started in Flagstaff, Prescott area, as well as like Pine Top. So if you're interested in that, Gary, shoot me a DM on Twitter at Tucson Bitcoin. But yeah, I was talking. There's a group of pretty solid people in Flagstaff that I really like with Atlas Arms, like Austin Jones and Suckboy Tony. If you're not following Suckboy Tony on Twitter, you have to. That guy's doing some crazy stuff with the 3D printed guns. And I was DMing him last week. So there are people that would be interested in, going to meetups, but I don't know how interested they are in necessarily starting one. But yeah, I just want to see meetups everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're so incredibly important. I think that's, like you look at what happens with meetups is they form, they start branching out and impacting the community. They on-ramp businesses to start accepting Bitcoin. And it's like the same, I think it's a similar model and idea to what they did in El Zonte, El Salvador. It's like this network, creating these network effects in local communities. This is how we get to a brighter future. Oh, Zarn, good to have you in. Zarn's always commenting on my posts. It's like comments first exclamation point. Like, yes, you're the first comment. It's funny. But yeah, I think the areas of Arizona we need to cover. So we have 3 meetups. Pretty happy with Sierra Vista because that was my old stomping grounds. I spent a lot of time out there. But I'd like to see Yuma even. I think and ultimately, like, one thing that we haven't started yet that I think would be incredibly powerful is Spanish speaking meetups. And like, if anybody's interested, that's a Spanish speaker and started. I don't speak a lick of Spanish. I know like a few words like payaso and pendejo. But
I can understand it a lot better than I can speak it.
I understand American speaking it. Native speakers, I really struggle. Which is kind of funny. It's just like the bad accent makes sense to me. But I think that's important. I've been really stoked about what Camilla Campton.
At Swan. Yeah, she's doing
Yeah.
a fantastic job.
Yeah.
She's got a whole Spanish YouTube channel for Bitcoin stuff, or not channel, it's the Swan channel. But yeah, tons of Spanish content, which is awesome. Yeah, she's great.
And one of the reasons why I think that's important, like going back to what I was talking about earlier about the immigrant communities, like these are people that are not served by the financial system and Bitcoin's gonna make a lot more sense to them. These are a lot of people that have immigrated and are sending money home in remittances, and that's just a no-brainer. Bitcoin is the best way to do that. And yeah, I think that is a community that could really grow, and a lot more so than the people that, that a lot of people come to the meetups that, are just interested in Bitcoin as an asset, like to sit on, which is cool and whatever. But what really gets me fired up is people becoming actual Bitcoiners. Like owning Bitcoin doesn't mean shit. Being a Bitcoiner is an ethos and an attitude. It's stepping into like this attitude of sovereignty and cypherpunk mentality. And yeah, I think like people, a lot of Spanish speakers in Arizona are a lot more primed than the English speakers. So that's something I'm super passionate about and like to see. And fortunately, I've been in discussions with people. It's just, finding somebody that's willing to actually put the legwork in to do it, I think is sometimes harder.
Yeah. And we can, like we have ways to organize sponsorships, free beer, food, stuff like that. We can connect anybody with.
Dirtbags, always happy to help.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the peer-to-peer I'm fired up about being able to buy eggs over Lightning pretty soon. Like that's like just something that's building a chicken coop, getting some chickens, and then selling the eggs for for Bitcoin over Lightning. Like just something as simple as that. My kids and I eat an absolute fuck ton of eggs, so I'm excited about that.
Gary, if you're not on Twitter, you can go over to our website, toxicairwaves.show, and there'll be a link to join the Telegram group. And that way you can chat with us and find us. That's probably the easiest way to contact us if you want to talk more about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely jump in the Telegram group. And I also hate Twitter. I've made 3 accounts in the last 4 months just because they keep, I don't know. I was proud of myself. There was one thing I almost said today that definitely would have got me banned, but I instead of saying it and getting banned, I just commented that this is the kind of tweet that usually gets me banned. That I didn't actually get banned, so that was good. Orange Pill, your local farmers market, yes. And there's I knew the place that I used to buy organs and beef and lamb up in the Portland area when I was living up there. There's a lot, there was a guy there that I never really connected with him on Bitcoin, but anyway, here's this guy. He sold essentially it looked like ground beef, but it was ground up organs, lamb, from lamb and cow and stuff like that. And he put a label on there, not for human consumption, and then sold it with a wink and a nod because he just did it all himself. He butchered the animal, pulled out the organ, made this, but then he sold it as quote unquote dog food so that he could sell it to whatever. But everybody knew, no, the only difference between this and whatever else is that it wasn't in some government, regulated facility that it was done. So I would buy that all the time and eat it all the time, cook it with everything. That was some of the, organs from really, really top tier grass-fed cows and sheep and stuff like that. That's extremely good for you.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was one who, I don't know. I like seeing that stuff. People who, are willing to step outside the rule just a little bit to be reasonable. And so, yeah, I think he charged $7 a pound. It was a ridiculously good deal.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Sarah. That's actually something on my agenda, and I'm rolling out a plan to get on things like that because I think that's incredibly important. We have a awesome regenerative farming, local farming movement happening in Tucson. Monsanto tried to come here and screw everything up, and they got chased out with pitchforks. And I think that attitude is so good, and that I think that is a a huge market to tap and to evangelize too, because that's essentially what we're doing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I went to one of the gun shows. I need to do this on a regular basis. I just have like a really bad habit of spending money I shouldn't when I go to gun stores and gun shows. But I was orange pilling some people there, and I think that is, yeah, we're talking about it.
Yep. Agorism for sure.
Exactly. And I think things like that are really productive. I think it'd be that's something I want to talk about, you know, at the next meetup, is like going out and doing those things, because it, you know, it's this whole idea of like the idea of the remnant presented in Isaiah's job is not going and preaching to the masses. It's just a complete and utter waste of time. Like if I was going and like shilling Bitcoin, and I started doing this, you know, right off the bat, where I like the first thing I did was I reached out to like the local chambers of commerce and like kind of the established groups. It's just such an utter waste of time going to those groups, like the gun shows, the farmers markets, you know, talking to people like food trucks. I think that might not be here legally is and you know, even like talking to like laborers and landscapers, like those people are so much more likely to get it, you know. And like I did, when we watered down the message of Bitcoin, you just get bullshit.
Yeah.
Just get utter bullshit. Like, you know, buying Bitcoin on Robinhood does nothing for anybody, and you know, shilling shitcoins does nothing for anybody.
Yeah. Yeah, and to like have like you talk about, like especially people who, you know, might have, you know, some immigration issues or something like that, you know, to show how, you know, it's like, oh, you know, to access this, you know, to access the old financial system, you need all this paperwork and documentation and whatever. And it's to access this financial system, you download and run completely free open source software. And that's it. And it's for a lot of people that clicks. And like, wait, there's no how do I apply for an account? You don't. You download completely free software. You run it on the absolute shittiest hardware you can find. I mean, I've bought $10-$20 computers that run Bitcoin Core no problem. Like you can run a node on freaking old piece of junk IBM, you know, before even Lenovo took over ThinkPads. I mean, it's crazy, you know, or just like literally any smartphone, download Blue Wallet, download Samurai Wallet, you know, all these different wallets you can get for completely free.
Bitcoin is obligatory, but most people don't want to recognize.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
If you care about the future, yeah.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we're headed into a world very, very quickly where people will either choose to, I mean, the most important financial decision a person's going to make over the next decade is when and how they adopt Bitcoin, period. And so, like, people will either choose to adopt it and opt into that system, or they're going to be at the mercy of whatever it is, you know, Klaus Schwab comes up with next and all his friends.
Mr. Bill Gates.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that topic, so I haven't figured out Breeze Wallet yet. I'm kind of slow when it comes to understanding technology. But yeah, Breeze Wallet has like integrated point of sale stuff on your phone, and I think they run like a light node client, which is, you know, cool. It's not custodial, same way that, you know, Blue Wallet Lightning is. But you know, that being said, the kind of figuring out how to manage channels and stuff like that is definitely a lot more difficult. But yeah, I mean, it's like one thing I like to do. I stole this idea from Brian Harrington, is just like all the waiters and waitresses at the restaurants that I frequent. Like I always offer to set them up with Wallet of Satoshi and start tipping them sats.
Yeah.
You know, I do that at the cigar shop that I go to on a regular basis. Speaking of which, I need to pick up some cigars. And you know, things like this I think are great. Constant updates with Bitcoin Core once a year would be fine.
Yeah, you can always skip updates. I'm always a few versions behind for sure. Yeah, I'm
Gosh,
yeah,
everybody's telling me.
definitely not trying to start a node debate, but I'm definitely a core ride or die. I don't do any of the Raspberry Pi stuff.
Yeah, or Sarah's just messaged me. Orange Pill in the farmers market would love to talk. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot about Moon Wallet, and I haven't downloaded. I just haven't.
Tip people. Zorn says tip people you don't like in Bitcoin SV. That yeah.
XRP
Bitcoin
too.
SV people still crack me up. Like there's their whole thing is CSW Craig Stephen Wright Satoshi, and I swear the first 4 or 5 times I saw somebody post, they do all those just completely stupid writing analysis things where they're like, this is a paragraph that was written by Craig Wright. This is a paragraph that was written by Satoshi. Clearly they're the same person. And it's like, what the fuck are you? Like literally the first 4 or 5 times I saw that, I thought, okay, no, there's no way they're serious. Like these people are dumb. They're very, very, very dumb. They're not that dumb. Like there's no way they're serious. That they're like, we're comparing paragraphs. That's how we're determining who Satoshi is. It's like we have a way that he could verify it by signing one message, and but we're instead doing text analysis or something. Like I was absolutely convinced I was being trolled, and that these people were just messing with me. And then I finally figured out it's like no, they're serious. It's a lot worse than it looks.
Yeah. Well, their big argument now, and this is coming from the Bcashers too, is that Bitcoin has veered off the path of the white paper, and they treat it as like the white paper is like doctrine, and yeah. The lawsuit's funny unless you're like on the receiving end of it, then it's not as funny.
A good book on this, Block Size Wars. A lot of you have probably read it. Read it recently. Yeah, that's a good book. Goes through the kind of the whole history. That stuff was a little bit before my time, so it was cool to read through the history and kind of get caught up on all that.
Yeah, we're fairly late bloomers here. I'm 2018, class of 2018.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, around then.
I didn't really get it, honestly, until pretty recently. 2020 was when it really clicked. I think like my moment where I saw Bitcoin as incredibly important was in 2019, reading the Bitcoin standard, but it was kind of blockchain bi-curious, or a better term with it. I was kind of a shit coiner, and then started the podcast roughly a year ago, and it took me about 3 times. Some of the first people I had on was Ben and Colin from WTF Happened in 1971.
Oh, nice. Guys.
Then I had on Guy Swan, and I don't know, I think like everybody out on the podcast like kind of gave me shit, and it really was helpful and challenged me to actually go and do a lot of reading on the topics. And that's like one of the best things about being a podcast person, or producing a podcast, is just the amount of research that goes into it. It just reads so much.
Yeah.
I've been reading some Hans Hoppe.
Nice.
I
have not gotten into him yet, which is an epic fail on my part.
Yeah. Heavily Armed Clown tweeted, some of you have never read Hoppe, and it shows. And
guilty as charged.
Yeah. Okay, I guess I got some more reading to do. Thank God for Guy Swan. That guy's helped me out so much with Bitcoin Audible.
Yeah. We were talking about this, for the show, but him and his brother Agorist View, I mean, just absolutely just rock solid humans. Like, it's just, it's like, there's a lot of people that understand Bitcoin well like them. There's a lot of people that, that do good content like he does and all that, but it's just like just outside of, totally independent of Bitcoin or whatever. Like I've, had the pleasure of hanging out with them in person a bunch of times or several times. And yeah, very, very, very good, solid humans. Wonderful, wonderful people to be around.
Yeah, Guy Swan is just, he was on Dave Smith's podcast. And if, I think like one cool thing is, as a community that we can do is like actually, I don't know, this might be stupid, but I think specifically like, going and engaging in when people are like actually genuinely curious, not like Lex Friedman, but like Dave Smith seems like he's pretty close to Yeah, Guy Swan's audiobooks are fantastic. He did the Block Size Wars. But like engaging with those posts and like promoting it, because it really, you know, incentivizes guys like Dave to bring Guy back on. And I think that's huge, because like this is something I believe in, is like going into the libertarian communities and not necessarily calling them LARPers, even though the majority of them are, and like trying to get a few of them to Orange Pill, because they're just so close. And you know, the other one, there's a lot of shitcoining there, and you know, let them shitcoin. Who cares? Like, you know, there's like at one of the libertarian meetings I went to, this guy was like promoting this idea of like direct democracy blockchain voting.
Oh gosh.
And it's like, that's probably one of the worst ideas. Like we're at this meeting discussing how awful the vax mandates are, and like the majority of the population is going to support this.
Yeah.
It's like, are you really going to like promote something that encourages mob rule? Like, you're a fucking idiot. And on top of that, you're promoting shitcoins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Technology is what guarantees rights.
Yeah. It's, yeah. Fucking morons. I'm trying to think. Yeah. Every time we say wrap, we're wrapping up. The chat gets super active, and then we get rolling for another 30, 45 minutes. Let's see. Anything else in closing? You got shout outs for anybody?
Let's see. No, not for me.
I'm one thing I'm pretty stoked on is the company Zebedee and Bitcoin gaming.
Yeah.
This is another thing on my million agendas that I have, a little bit lower on the totem pole, but we got an awesome dude at the Phoenix meetup that's works for Zebedee as a project manager, and he we've been talking for months about starting a Bitcoin gaming meetup. And I just recently stumbled across this stream that Bitcoin Magazine does on Twitch, occasionally promoting Bitcoin gaming. I forgot what they're called. But I think that's something that's going to be pretty dope. And I think it's dope because, you know, what's ultimately going to happen with this is a lot of people are going to start engaging with money in a different way and earning money, and they're not going to pay taxes on it. And it's like part of the reason why I think Robinhood trading is absolutely hilarious, because you know that 99% of those people aren't reporting their GameStop trades on.
But Robinhood is, guarantee that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just like the IRS can't handle all of it. It's going to be Anarch Tyranny, selective enforcement. But yeah. So that's one shot I have. Check out Zebedee Mint Gox. They got like a monthly event that they do. You can earn sats. Check out Camila's.
Camilla Campton.
Camila Campton. Yeah, Kamala Harris messes me up.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, Camila. Check out her podcast if you're a Spanish speaker. Hit me up if you want to start a meetup in northern Arizona or Yuma or even like Safford area. That would be super dope. There's a lot of badasses out there.
Yeah, I like Safford.
Globe would be cool too. Super small community, but like Globe. I feel like I'm missing something big, but yeah. Anyways, good rip.
We'll be back next week.
Yep. And that's it.